'86, the market crashed with the changes, tax laws. And I mean, it was a bloodbath in Dallas. And, I'm a 20-something-year-old guy just not making any deals and hard to compete with the older guys that were more established. And I didn't pick the best territory. I picked Northwest Dallas, which was Valwood was just getting going then. But I also had Harry Hines, Walnut Hill, that area, which is pretty rough. And I think that's kind of another thing that turned me off is cold calling in that neighborhood, knocking on doors and wearing a suit. And, it's 100 degrees outside. You're just sweating through your clothes all day and showing these unair conditioned warehouses. And I was always envious of the office brokers, because they were air conditioned and, they were higher rents and bigger commissions. And I was like, I wish I was doing that instead of this. But, God has a purpose for us, and that's all part of the journey. And it's really served me well.
Bryan Marsh, how you doing today, buddy?
Conrad Matson. It's been forever.
It has been a while since we've gotten together.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when you were a fresh little kid.
Boy, I was a little
started
kid.
in the business.
Before you came on today, I was like, how long has it been since we first met? And I, did my, and basically it was 23 years ago.
That's right.
Isn't that crazy?
I was going to say 2001.
Early 2002. Roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was your first go?
That was my first go in the real estate world. And you were at the big dog back in the day in the industrial space, Reef.
That's right. Yeah.
A lot of people don't.
It's a great run. I loved it.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun. It's funny. Reef, for those that don't know, back in the day, I mean, y'all were like the Prologis or the Blackstones, in industrial.
We had 18 million square feet of industrial in Dallas. Fort Worth, mainly Dallas, right?
Right.
And we had another 3 million square feet in Oklahoma that we managed from Dallas.
Right.
So really made us one of the largest, if not the largest,
for sure,
industrial landlord in this area. So
no, and y'all by far forever had the greatest tenant, the Byron Nelson, right on 17.
That was one of my favorite events, but it was also hard to do the Byron Nelson for 4 straight days.
That is a lot.
Every year.
That is a lot.
But 17th tee box, which is a great hole.
Yes.
Out at the old Four Seasons.
Yep.
And we would spend about $100,000 on that event for the week. I'm sure it costs even probably double that now.
Probably.
But we really took care of our customers and our brokers and partners that we worked with. And
so much fun.
We went all out, on all the swag and, open bar, food. And it was a fun time.
Those were like,
showing up for that 4 days in a row. That was, I needed a break.
That was like peak Byron Nelson days too. The pavilion. Yeah. When Byron Nelson was still alive. I mean, so well attended. You had all the best golfers in the world there.
And they came because of the pavilion, right? They loved the scene there. And then also the hotel.
Sure.
And being able to have their family stay right on the course with them. And then it was kind of the Texas two-step with the Colonial,
right?
The following week. And,
sure.
And so,
That's where it all started, though. Back in the day, I was hounding you for itty-bitty listings that Reef had.
Just annoying me all the time.
But, it's funny. You left Reef, years later, and we always kept in touch, though, even after you left. You went off into the office world.
Well, you just had this happy-go-lucky, like I want to learn, and you had that personality that was just real engaging. I mean, so
I appreciate.
we hit it off.
No, we
right
did.
away
for sure.
And it's just I love the fact that it's continued.
Yeah,
here 23 years later, and we've moved around a little bit, but we're still friends and trying to do deals together. And
right,
yeah.
No, I mean, you were really kind of the first guy who gave me my first like institutional quality listings, back in the day. So that was awesome to cut my teeth and get reps on y'all's product. And we obviously formed a hell of a relationship and have stayed in touch.
Well, you're a good broker, and you've done even so well for yourself, and I'm very happy for you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Have your own firm here, you and Greg, and
yeah, it's been a heck of a run. Would have never dreamed of the career in this life, kind of growing up.
Well, you stuck with it, right? I mean, that's I was a broker early. My first job out of college was CBR, now CBRE. It was called Coldwell Banker Commercial back then. But straight out of college, became a broker.
How did you find CB way back in the day? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I studied real estate in college in finance, and I got my license because I knew I was studying real estate. I had all the courses, and it was easy to go take the test. Sure. My dad was a broker, so he sponsored me initially. Right. He was a home builder, so real estate was always in my blood. Got it. And I thought I should be a banker to start with, because I thought that was a better training ground to learn commercial real estate, about finance and debt and all that. And when I went and interviewed with all these big banks in town, they were just too stuffy for me. It was suit and tie and just sitting in an office all day crunching numbers and credit analysis and loan committee. And it was just like, I want to go make the big dollars. And I was a more outgoing person and had been real active in college in my fraternity, being president of IFC. And I was a student ambassador, what they called North Texas 40. I was at the University of North Texas. So I was kind of a big man on campus, in a neat way, I guess. And so the brokers loved that about me. The bankers couldn't care less. They were more focused on my GPA, which wasn't very good because of all the fun I had. But so it was kind of my second choice to go get into brokerage, but it was exciting. I thought it fit my personality. And so I interviewed with all the shops. And funny thing, I tell a lot of, I mentor a lot of undergraduates, students now.
Sure, me too.
I tell them the story about how when I went to the commercial real estate firms back in the day, you had to take a personality test. Right. And so I went to one firm and I failed. And they were like, Bryan, I'm sorry.
Henry S. Miller?
I won't say but
because I'm pretty sure I took that same test.
Yeah, and I was like, how do fail? Is it there's just, you were missing that certain something that we're looking for. I was like, really? Okay. So then I went to Coldwell Banker. Yeah. And again, they loved me, but said, you got to take this test. And you're like, oh boy. Now I know. I was like, well, I know how to answer it now. I know what they're looking for. And instead of answering truthfully to myself, I said, well, this is how a broker probably would answer this. Right. And I passed. There you go. And I got the job. But about 6 years later, I was like, I don't really like this. I'm not a good salesperson. I am better behind the scenes, right? The ownership side, the numbers side, the finance side.
You're definitely a big thing.
And, I got out.
But let's go back though. Who were you working under, like when you were at Coldwell Banker back in the day?
Gene Russo.
You were working under Gene Russo.
Yeah, I started as her runner.
Okay.
And I love Gene to death. She's a legend. She's one of the only female industrial brokers back in the day. Yeah. But she's a great salesperson. Taught me a lot about that and relationships. And
so it was like Jay Lorch and Chuck Finney there. And
yeah, Jay Lorch.
Was Dave Anderson there at that time?
Dave Anderson was there. Wow. Yeah. But even Gary Carr and Jerry Cobb and John Rind,
so much talent.
Yeah,
but
I did it.
ultimately, you were like, brokerage really.
Well,
is.
the other big thing, I started in '82,
Okay.
and 86, the market crashed with the changes, tax laws, and I mean, it was a bloodbath in Dallas.
Right.
And I'm a 20-something-year-old guy just not making any
money
deals, and hard to compete with the older guys that were more established, and I didn't pick the best territory. I picked Northwest Dallas, which was Valwood was just getting going.
Yes.
But I also had Harry Hines, Walnut Hill, that area, which is pretty rough.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of another thing that turned me off is cold calling in that neighborhood, knocking on doors, and
having to look over your shoulder the whole time.
Yeah, wearing a suit, and it's 100 degrees outside. Just you're just sweating through your clothes all day, and showing these unair conditioned warehouses. And I was always envious of the office brokers, because they were air conditioned. And, they were higher rents and bigger commissions. And I was like, I wish I was doing that instead of this. But
that led you to
God has a purpose for us, and it's all part of the journey, and it's really served me well, my industrial background.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and so from there you went to Catellis, right? If memory serves me correctly.
Yeah. So I said I need a job that'll pay me a salary.
Yep.
Plus bonus. And Catellis.
Were you married yet with kids?
I just gotten married, but no kids.
Okay.
And Catellis Development was part of. It was called Santa Fe Pacific Realty back then.
Okay.
And it was a more Santa Fe Railroad and Southern Pacific Railroad. Were planning to merge together.
Okay.
And before the merger was completed, they spun off all their excess real estate into what became Catellis.
Got it.
And then eventually the Interstate Commerce Commission, disavowed the merger because they thought it would be a monopoly across the southern United States, because both railroads kind of ran Chicago to California. Across the southern U.S. And so the railroads never merged, but Catellis had already been created. And so we had tons of land. And I spent 13 years there.
Did you really?
Dealing with all these different land holdings all over the western United States.
Wow. Tell me some of the more unique stories within Catellis. Like, were there some challenged land parcels?
Well, I put out like on my resume and even on LinkedIn that, I've done deals in over 300 cities.
Yep.
Because I've followed the tracks, and that was one of my jobs, was just to sell this stuff.
Yeah.
And, I would just hop in a car, head down the tracks, and pull into the next town, 30 miles away, next station. We'd look on the right-of-way maps and say, okay, here's an extra 200-foot wide strip, or, and we were just looking for property to sell.
Unbelievable.
So there was a time there over a 3-year period where I averaged 2 closings a week on land. And
that's a lot of
deals.
But
it was a great deal.
But you got tons of reps.
Yep. And I got a piece of the action. So I was incentivized where I got 10% of the profit over our basis. So it was very lucrative. I was looking for all the sites that had value, but I also had a job to get rid of as much as I could. But and most of them were ground leases. The railroad would just that's all they would do. They'd do a 30-day cancelable ground lease, but customers had been on these properties for
decades,
20, 30, 40 years. Some of them might have a grain elevator or a warehouse, or maybe it's an old depot or things like that. So a lot of very interested, motivated buyers that had always wanted to purchase this real estate, but the railroad was never selling it. So that was fun dealing dealing with that. It got to really see the country, and
I imagine.
Just had to figure out quick. You go into a small town, you have to figure out, okay, what do I think this is worth? Is this a
right?
10,000 an acre? Is this $1 a foot? Can I get $5 a foot for this land? Maybe it's something. Yeah. And so you'd have to do a quick sort of market evaluation and study,
call on
and
a few signs that are guys got signs around town,
and just kind of figure out, because I wanted to get as much as we could, but didn't want to let it go too cheap, and so that was interesting. Just being sort of a mini appraiser, and then dealing with people, just all walks of life, and
God Almighty, I can imagine.
Yeah, I had one strip that went through the desert of New Mexico, and one of the richest men in the world at that time owned a 60,000 acre ranch, bordering on both sides. And I called him up one day, and I said, "Would you be interested in buying all this excess land along the tracks?" And he said, "Well, of course I would." And so I met him. He said, "Well, let's meet in a little town, 3,000 people." Met at a little local cafe. I'm sitting there hanging out, waiting, and here comes this beat up old Jeep, and this old cowboy gets out in coveralls and dusty, and I was like, it turned out to be this guy, and that's just
really
the life he lived in his ranch, and we made a deal, became friends. He took me back to this ranch house, and we hung out, and
that's so cool.
It's just,
what was the guy's name? Do you remember what his name was?
Henry Singleton.
Henry Singleton.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So, but the other thing about Catellus was that I ended up getting really into mixed use development.
Okay.
And we had an opportunity to develop the old rail yard in downtown Santa Fe, New Mexico. And basically the city was asking us to come do something with this blighted area that was just a bunch of homeless people, rundown buildings, right in the center of historic downtown Santa Fe.
Yeah, sure.
Had 2 historic depots on it. And my company's leadership was like, "Does anybody know anything about Santa Fe?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, my dad just moved there. This was like 1987."
Okay.
And so I went and checked it out. I said, "This is a great piece of property. There's a lot of
probably the best one in your portfolio."
It was awesome. And so, I ended up moving to Santa Fe and worked on, first it was working with the community, chambers of commerce, city planning, all that, neighborhood groups.
Sure.
We were doing a public-private partnership with the city. We needed their help to clean up some of the zoning. Yeah. Because a lot of the title was still just easement title with the railroad, or it had some clouds on it.
Right.
The city had an opportunity. We declared it a redevelopment area, so the city could come and use their condemnation powers to clean up title. And then we were going to use revenue bonds to build parking garages, which we were going to use the city's help on that. Yeah. And so it was a joint process. We were working together. And like I said, the city at the time was very pro-development and wanted to see this neighborhood change. Yeah. We hired a great architect that did Battery Park City in New York.
Oh, wow.
And really studied the area, studied Spain, and got images from there, but looked at the history of Santa Fe. We put together a great mixed-use development. And this is back, we were doing mixed-use buildings with ground floor retail, office on second, third stories, and residential on the top floors. Yeah. I mean, there were just not any developments like that back in those days.
No.
And with a wrap around a structured parking garage, so that we could eliminate surface parking. We could make it more of a dense kind of urban pedestrian feel.
Right.
We had little narrow streets, kind of come to a little T intersection. You go around a corner, there'd be a little plaza or park, very walkable.
Yeah.
And it was really drawing from the city itself.
Yeah.
That plan ended up winning the American Institute of Architects National Urban Design Award for the best project in the country.
Wow.
And the city shot it down.
No.
The politics changed. The council, everybody, all new council came in, and the city at the time was going through this anti-growth, anti-outsiders, anti-development. Let's keep it the way it is. The city ought to control it. Let's turn it into a park, a public, public open space, performing arts, maybe a new city hall.
Yeah. Let's
build some affordable housing there. Very low intensity, low density.
Yeah.
So we fought with them for a few years, but eventually I got the best of them.
Did you?
Yeah, because we ended up buying it for $10 million, and I sold it to him for $26 million.
That feels good.
Under a threat of condemnation, which meant we could reinvest all the money tax-free, kind of like a 1031 exchange.
Yeah, sure.
So it ended up being a good deal. It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to build the project, live there the rest of my life. I love Santa Fe. It's a great culture.
It's a very cool town. It's a very cool town.
It's an odd town. It's a mix of conservatives and liberals, Hispanic and Anglo, and straight,
Native
and
American,
gay, and rich and poor, and the funny thing was, I did a lot of neighborhood meetings and city council meetings and things like that, which is great training for later in life, right?
Right.
Again, it's part of that journey that, like, it wasn't what I wanted, but looking back, I was learning how to work in entitlements and zoning and approvals, and but our biggest backers were the locals that had been there forever, the Hispanic community, the working class. And they were the ones that saying, that place has been a dump my whole life.
Yeah.
We need jobs. We need revenue. We want something nice. So they were all for it. And the opponents were the rich folks from California and New York that had moved in there.
Yeah.
They didn't want to see it. They came to the city to get away from all that.
What's there today?
We sold it to the city. They spent another 10 years fighting amongst themselves, trying to decide what should go there.
Yeah.
And eventually they did more or less do what they wanted. It was they turned half of it into a park. They did some museums.
Okay.
They brought in high-speed rail to connect to Albuquerque.
Huh.
Santa Fe is the capital of the state.
Yeah.
Albuquerque's a big city.
Yep.
And it's got a little retail. It's got an REI there, a few little restaurants. And so they got what they wanted, and we did okay too. So
yeah, they could have had something better though if they would have just.
Could have been a lot better. Yeah. But anyway, that's I left after that.
Yeah. That's when you went to Reef, right?
And then that's when I went to Reef. So that goes full circle to when you and I when we met,
first got together, and that was that probably your first real kind of deep dive into really the asset management side of the game? I mean you had done a little there at Catellis.
I was doing asset management, but it was land.
Yeah,
for Catellis, and then I moved into the development side of the business and mixed use, because the other things that I was on a team that we also had. Los Angeles Union Station, we own that. In San Francisco, we own Mission Bay, which was a huge plot of land right next to the financial district. And in San Francisco, we also had land around San Diego's depot.
Yeah,
Catellis was starting to get into being a master developer. Like we took on Stapleton, the old Stapleton Airport in Denver.
Yeah,
the old Muller Airport in Austin, the old city airport.
Yeah.
Later, and so we were branching out. So I was part of that group, that mixed use group. But I had done the asset management, and then I went to Reef, and that was purely asset management, with we had in-house property management.
Yeah.
We were representing pension funds and institutional investors.
Yep.
We had our own private REITs that we created, raised money.
Yep.
We had portfolio managers that worked directly with the institutional clients, investors.
Yep.
And then I ran the Dallas office along with Kim Boudreau, Joe Akers.
Sure. Anthony
James, so we managed this 22 million square foot portfolio.
Yeah.
And, representing those clients. And, so I was there about 6 years or so.
Out on that lovely Halsey Way location up there.
DFW Trade Center.
Yeah.
And it was a great run, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We were just, big player, and got to work with a lot of great brokers, did a lot of deals. And again, I found that I really liked being on that side as the owner. And, representing the properties, doing what's best for our clients, and working on acquisitions and dispositions.
Yep.
But mainly it was just keeping things leased, keeping them running and operating. And but that's when I had found my first data center.
Interesting.
Was at Reef, and back in 2001.
Okay.
We had a warehouse that was on JL in Richardson.
Yeah.
And Perot Systems had converted it into a data center.
Okay.
And their customer there was Alamo Car Rental, and they ran their reservation center out of that building. And when the lease was up, they said, "We're taking Alamo back to Plano and our headquarters there.
Yeah.
What do you want us to do with this building?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't really know anything about data centers."
Right.
So I called up Paul Moser and Rob Kennedy at Stream, who were had just gotten into data centers at that time.
Right.
I said, "Guys, come take a look at this building. What do you think?" And they were like, "Oh, Bryan, that's great. This is awesome. You need to keep this. Tell them to leave everything." I'm like, "Okay, well, what are we going to do? Lease it, sell it?" "Well, we'll put it on the market for both, but you're going to have to clean it up, fix it up. Got to keep the lights on. Can't mothball a data center."
Right.
So right after that, the .com crash happened, and we ended up sitting on that thing for like 2 years. And I remember our utilities bill was like $20,000 a month.
Woo!
To keep this data center alive.
Yeah.
And my client was the New York Common Fund. It was a pension fund for all the New York state employees.
Yep.
They're kind of like, "Bryan, what'd you get us into? This is costing us a ton of money.
Right.
Keep this thing going." I'm like, "Just
hold on.
I think this is the right move."
Yep.
Well, finally, after 2 years, Paul and Rob found a buyer, and it was Pilgrim's Pride Chicken,
who was right down the street.
And they're based out of East Texas, right? But a chicken producer.
Yeah.
They needed a data center.
I was thinking of Jimmy Dean sausage.
Yeah, you're Jimmy Dean, Owens Country.
The Owens Country, yeah. Which was
Pilgrim's Pride was East Texas.
Yeah,
and they ended up paying $210 a square foot for this building. Our basis was like $30 a square foot as a warehouse.
Right.
We didn't put any money to turn it into a data center. We just inherited it.
Wow.
Office buildings in Dallas weren't even trading at $200 a foot back then.
Right.
And so it was,
a
home run. Right. And that's when the light bulb went off about data centers. Like, I need to get into this.
Yes.
I need to get into this.
You did a short stop at Equistone, but then, being an office guy, but then let's talk about data centers, because that's what's extremely hot in today's world. So then you go to Digital Realty, who's the 800-pound gorilla of data centers now. But where were they when you started over there? They were just getting started in this data center game, right?
They were. Yeah, they had gone public in 2004, and I joined in 2009.
Yep.
Essentially, it started as a $300 million joint venture between GI Partners, CB Richard Ellis Investors,
Yep.
and CalPERS.
Okay.
They each put $100 million in
Yep.
to start the company
Yeah.
in like 2001. The first building they bought was the Univision Tower, 2323 Bryan Street in downtown Dallas,
Yep.
which was then called a telco hotel.
Right.
And
just a lot of fiber.
A lot of fiber coming in there. And if you look at that building, right up by the Performing Arts Center for Dallas is a big central office for AT&T.
Yep.
If you look down Bryan Street in the other direction, over by Baylor Hospital, there's another AT&T central office.
Right.
And so main and main for those two central offices was the Univision Tower.
Okay.
And in the late 80s, it started being developed as a telco hotel, as a place where carriers could meet and link up with each other.
Yep.
So that was Digital Realty's first acquisition in 2001. Ever. Okay?
Yeah.
But then they went public in 2004. Yep. And then they asked me to come on board when they had just put a 70-acre site under contract in Richardson. I'm a Richardson boy, grew up there.
That's right.
High school there.
Your nickname's the mayor of Richardson.
And with Reef, I had a ton of properties in Richardson, and I've done a lot of business with the city. I'd done this stint in Santa Fe doing development that had won this award.
Yeah.
I knew I'd had one data center that I knew
you had
a little bit.
You had a skin on the wall.
I had something. And they said, hey, we need somebody that knows this town, knows how to develop. And of course, my industrial background, because data center's a big warehouse for computers.
That's right.
And so it all kind of gelled and kind of came together there. And, my first order of business was to develop that property. And, over the next 11 years that I was at Digital Realty, we built about 1.2 million square feet on that campus, 100 megawatts of power.
Yeah.
Built 8 different buildings. It became the flagship for Digital Realty's data center campuses.
Okay.
When I first got there, we were just doing a building here.
Yep.
Go to another city, build one there. We were never building them all on a big campus like that. Right. So there was a lot that went into, you have to think about, okay, how are we going to get the power to all these buildings on a, smaller site and build a substation. We got to think security and loading and deliveries and how does it all work together as a campus? Yeah. And so that helped me a lot, and worked with a lot of great people, to develop that. And it became really for the city of Richardson, one of the biggest tax revenues generators. The only thing larger is the TI campus. Wafer plant. Yeah. So, right. Which TI invests about $3 billion into that project. And we were at $1 billion, roughly, of what we put into developing it. But our customers, the tenants that actually had the computers that leased the space, the data center space, their business personal property is well over $1 billion.
Right.
So
usually it's 3 to 5x, I think, right? The value of the building nowadays, roughly.
Yeah, what the tenants put into the space is even more than the cost of the real estate.
Right.
And they continually refresh those servers, just like you do with your laptop or your cell phone.
Yeah, they all get
every
obsolete.
2 or 3 years, it's going to go bad or something's going to happen. So they proactively refresh these servers, continue to keep reinvesting.
Yeah,
that keeps hitting the personal property tax rolls. And
what was the Let's talk about how the data center world has changed a little bit. What was like the tenant makeup of most of those tenants in there? Like I think they call this colo, right? Colocation.
Yeah, co-location, right?
You have
just kind of a term for multi-tenant.
Multi-tenant, yes.
Right.
Were most of those buildings all multi-tenant, or?
Yeah, we at Digital, we really developed kind of a building block of like, here's the way we build them.
Okay.
And we would take like a 130,000 square foot building.
Yep.
Break it up into 6 different data halls. Each data hall had its own dedicated infrastructure, electrical, mechanical, backup generators, security, but all within, under one roof.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd get a company that would lease an entire data hall.
Sure.
And other times we would break that data hall up into multi-tenants, cages, cabinets.
Yeah.
And that's really what you call a colo environment. And we would just kind of lease, a data hall at a time, or we would call it a pod. And,
right.
We had a very specific design, how we built it, and certain service level agreement or SLA that would go along with it. Every data center is designed for a certain amount of power.
Sure.
Has to have, about room temperature, cooling.
Yes.
Has to be about 50% humidity. Can't be too dry for static electricity. Can't be too wet where there's condensation. So, these are highly technical, engineered buildings, right?
Yes.
With redundancy everywhere. Because if something breaks or fails, or you got to do some maintenance on it,
tornado proof, all that stuff.
All that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they're so expensive. They're so complex. All the redundancy, all the power that comes into them, all the cooling, security, fiber. Being able to withstand, tornadoes and and then structurally, a lot of times we were putting big, heavy equipment, chillers and things of that nature on the roof. So that all had to be beefed up. But we had a building block and we had a kit of parts, and we could customize it a little bit. We could say, okay, let's make it a little bit more redundant here, a little more powerful, or let's make it less powerful, a little lower density to kind of customize it for our tenants. But it was wildly successful. When we first started, we could name our price.
Right.
They were just flying off the shelves at rents that we're just now getting back to in some respects.
Right.
So we were really on the forefront of that multi-tenant, what we call now wholesale co-location. We were leasing the suites, the buildings, but the tenants took care of everything else inside with their equipment.
Yep.
And it just took off.
Right.
Yeah. But then, like everything in real estate, it all runs in cycles.
It does.
And developers know how to ruin a good thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially when there's an abundance of land here in DFW.
Abundance of land, and it was really spreading out. Dallas has always been one of the top 5 data center markets in the U.S.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is the fiber follows the highways and the railroads.
That's right.
And
they all
Dallas is a big logistics hub.
Right.
Lots of railroads coming in, a lot of interstates.
Yeah.
Dallas.
And then the Infomart is main and main, right? Pretty much.
Well, it's thought of really still Univision, 2323 Bryan.
Okay.
Still the hub, but it all connects over to the Infomart now. So we really got 2 what we're now calling carrier hotels.
Yep.
In the business. And so both Infomart and 2323 are the carrier hotels for Dallas. Yep. So that's where all the action happens on the connectivity.
Yep.
But like Chicago is another big data center market. Again, same reasons as Dallas because of the highways and think of fiber going coast to coast from New York to Silicon Valley. It's either going to go through Chicago if it's going across the northern United States, or it's going through Dallas across the southern U.S.
Yep.
And Northern Virginia is the largest data center market in the world. That's where all the subsea cables, fiber cables going under the Atlantic back to Europe, land in Virginia. It's also just outside of DC, the federal government.
Yep.
So that's kind of where the internet grew up.
Right.
Silicon Valley, all the tech companies located there.
Sure.
Subsea cables going back to Asia.
Yeah.
So those were kind of the big four markets.
Yep.
New York, New Jersey became one because of Wall Street.
Sure.
And then over time, it started moving into other secondary markets like Atlanta, Phoenix, up in the Pacific Northwest has become a big market.
Yep.
So yeah, now they're popping up everywhere.
Yeah, it's wherever you can get power.
Yeah. But when early 09, 10, 11, we could pretty much name our price, then more and more competition started coming on board.
Yep.
CyrusOne,
Yeah.
Here locally.
Sure.
Equinix, who had always been one of our biggest customers, started branching out.
Got it.
You had new firms like QTS
Yep.
come along.
Yeah.
And my old friends at Stream, they started building their own data centers.
Yeah, sure.
And so they started popping up here
Everywhere.
and there.
Yeah.
And, our competition, started undercutting us on rent. And the rents came down lower and lower and lower until, it was
what was probably
got a little overbuilt at a stage. Yeah.
When would you say it was overbuilt?
Well, like I say, in the early days, we were getting data centers were weird. We don't really quote rents on a per square foot basis, but it's usually on the power.
Yeah.
Because everything's designed in the data hall for a certain amount of power and cooling, right? So we quote on the kilowatt.
Yep.
Or the megawatt.
Sure.
And, in the early days, we were getting $180 to $200 per kilowatt per month.
Yep.
Plus electric, plus the utilities.
Yep.
When I left digital in 2019, we were leasing suites at $65 to $75 per kilowatt a month.
Okay.
That's how much it had fallen.
Wow.
Now, these were big deals, big spaces, but the competition was so intense. We were oversupplied. We had a glut on the market, and the big customers really could name the price, what they were willing to pay.
Right.
Mm. And the yields really fell quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's when I made the move. And
now you're the CEO of StratCap.
Now that's StratCap Data Centers.
Yeah.
Became the CEO. And I felt at the time, rather than building, the better strategy was to go out and buy existing data centers. Yeah. That everybody was moving into development, and that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And there was a missing link for who's going to buy these, after you build them.
Right.
Right. And the other thing I thought was that it's so hard to get the power and the fiber and all that there. It takes a long time. Getting the zoning approvals and building the building and getting it leased up. And, I was looking for a way to scale up quickly.
Yeah.
So I thought the avenue was to go start buying them.
Yep.
All the bones are there.
That's right.
In place, and we can start building a platform quicker. Mm-hmm. And then eventually we'll move back into development. That was the basic thesis.
Yeah.
And was able to go out and raise a bunch of money from, again, institutional investors, retail investors. We just started buying existing data centers already leased. And so that started in 2020.
Yep.
And then was good for a couple of years, even through COVID. It was hard.
Yeah. Right.
It was hard raising money during COVID. Everything was virtual.
Yeah.
I did 150 road shows, all virtual during COVID.
Yeah.
We were trying to raise $500 million of equity.
Yeah.
And we were successful.
Yep.
And then, but it was a low interest rate environment. So the cap rates were down there.
Sure.
And so one for the faint of heart, being able to buy these and, okay, what's our exit strategy? And you got to hold it long enough. You got to add some value.
Yeah.
And hope that the rates stay low, or cap rates on your exit, still makes sense. So,
and then from 19 to what, mid 22 ish, going into 23, all the space gets eaten up, right? There's no more supply.
Well, what happened right at that time when I left and I transitioned to StratCap was AI was coming into play.
Right.
And it really hadn't taken hold yet.
Right.
It was still in the early stages of being developed. But really before AI, it was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
That was the game changer. And that now we're all working from home.
Yep.
We're streaming movies all day long.
Right.
We're on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram.
That's right.
We're now ordering from Amazon to deliver everything.
Right.
We're not going into retail stores anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do your grocery shopping online.
Yeah, I don't go to the grocery store.
You can do your checkups with your doctor online,
right.
telehealth.
And all that data's got to go somewhere,
all
doesn't
that
it?
data. I mean, the data just, we say data or data.
Yeah, right.
I interchange it.
Yeah, sure.
Depending on who I'm talking to, but
right.
And it just exploded. So, I mean, we're creating. When I in 2017, I'll give you an example. We leased about 200 megawatts of data center space in a year in North America.
Okay.
200 megawatts.
200 megawatts. Not a lot.
Now we're doing over 2,500 megawatts. So now we've moved into gigawatts.
That's right.
So now we're like 2.5 gigawatts of demand of leasing activity in 1 year in North America.
Yep.
It's 10x
right
where it was just 7 years ago.
7 years ago. Yeah.
And really that was COVID, work from home,
sure,
networking, our digital economy, everything we do, that we're creating more Internet of Things now.
Right.
You think of your Ring doorbell,
that's right,
the camera, the video feeds.
Sure.
Cars are just roaming network devices now with all the information that they're putting out there. They're self-driving can be now, right?
Sure.
You think about the amount of data it takes to tell you where you are at GPS-wise, on the road, who's all around you, cars. Think about all that so much. You can sit in a Tesla now and you got a laptop there showing up where all those cars are and how fast you're going, how close you are, and slow down and back, change lanes. And think of the data. It's just incredible.
And then in the last, call it 18 months, it's just AI has just really changed.
Now it's AI. AI is unreal.
Yeah.
So
machine
that was
learning
being developed really in 2017, 18, 19, but it hadn't really hit our market yet.
Yeah.
But the cloud providers knew, like when I say cloud providers, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Oracle,
Meta,
IBM. Those are the cloud providers. Then you've got, in our industry, we use a term called hyperscale. These are the big boys, and we throw in like Meta and LinkedIn, Salesforce.com. Again, big users of data with their software and their platforms on the internet. And they're the ones, they could see it coming, but I think everybody was just trying to keep up with COVID and work from home. That it didn't, the AI factor didn't really start to come into play until the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so now, I mean, with AI, when
Well, you've gone from, these 100 to 150,000 square foot buildings, on 20 acres. So now these hyperscalers are like, well, if I can get 500 acres or even 1,000 acres, and now you're not getting all that power at once, but I mean, they're planning. I mean, we're talking about gigawatt campuses.
People are now planning 300 megawatt, 500 megawatt campuses,
right,
to accommodate that growth.
It's fascinating.
And the cloud providers, the hyperscalers, just can't do it fast enough themselves.
Right.
They've got all the money in the world.
They do.
To build their own.
Yep.
But they just can't. They don't have enough people. They just can't go fast enough on their own. So they do look to outsource and third-party providers.
Right.
And there are a lot of great companies that have grown up out of that and are building for those customers. And so we're hoping we get there too. We're still buying existing.
Yep.
We still feel there's a market for that. There's a need for developers and investors in those ground up developments to recycle their capital.
Yep.
And they need a way out.
Sure.
And there's just a huge appetite from institutional investors and retail investors and high net worth investors that they want to play in the digital space in the sector. And there's not many options. There's not many public data center companies left.
No.
You got Equinix, Digital Realty,
CyrusOne.
No, they've gone private.
Oh yeah, they're public.
QTS, so
right.
It's just there's not many options. Like, how do I invest in data centers unless I'm doing it on an alternative fund,
right?
A private fund,
right?
Which is what we do.
Yep.
So we're an alternative asset manager, investment manager, specializing in digital infrastructure, mainly data centers, but we also do cell towers.
Okay.
Another form of real estate, vertical real estate.
That's right.
But it helps support, the wireless infrastructure system.
Yeah.
And not everything's on fiber.
Right.
A lot of it still is over wireless. And now with 5G, where the wireless spectrums are going to be able to accommodate even more data. So the radio waves that the data resides and flies on, think of it as a bigger pipe that you can push more data through with 5G.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go as far. So you're going to have more towers and more antennas.
Got it.
A bigger network to be able to support that wireless infrastructure.
So where do you think we are in this boom of data centers that we're in right now? I mean, are we in the infancy stage? Or
I don't think we're in the infancy because they've been around now for 20 years or so.
Sure.
But they're evolving, and it's with AI. We really have to use brute force to get the compute to happen. We have data. We're great at storing data.
Yep.
It's the compute part that's still the difficult part right now. But with AI, it's advancing so rapidly where first it was learning how to speak and recognize words.
Right.
I mean, think of Google. It was all based on search keywords.
Yep.
Right? Conrad Mattson, and you type that in and it'll look for anything it can find on the internet with Conrad Mattson on it.
Right.
Now with AI, it's already kind of learned that. It's learned the language, and it's able to retain that.
Right.
Because it's done it before. So now it's moving into really thinking for itself, being able, predicting.
Yeah.
And being able to reflect on what it's learned.
I mean, if you haven't used ChatGPT yet, go check it out because your brain will explode. Like, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
you can put anything in there, and just within seconds, you can have a full report on whatever you want. Write me a story about XYZ.
It may not be completely right.
It's not completely
or accurate because it's pulling for what the content's been in there, but it's amazing what it can do.
90% accurate.
It's very, it's very close.
Yeah.
But it's getting even better.
Oh, sure.
And one term that I've heard is like they would have hallucinations. The AI would like think it's somewhere else, and those are starting to go away a little bit, less hallucinations, because it was like a child learning to speak and think.
Right.
And now it's advancing so much.
Right.
So it's hard to tell where it's going to be. It's, I've got some friends in the AI world that talk about we're all going to have agents that are going to help us do our jobs and lives. And we're going to manage these agents for us that are our AI agents.
Interesting.
So that we'd basically be able to do even more.
Yeah. What are you most excited about in the data center space moving forward?
It's, I think it's just seeing, right now we are moving into development. For me personally, that's what I, again, kind of going back to my roots and what I did for digital is, I really am looking forward to getting in more into the development space again, and seeing how they've evolved and where they're going.
Right.
I mean, we're really talking about much higher density, more power into a smaller space.
Yeah.
And being able to really make that work and what the technologies are going to be like to cool it.
Yeah.
Right. It was a little easier when it was low density and you could spread everything out. But now that it's in a smaller space, that's going to becomes more of a challenge. So I think there's going to be a lot of evolution and design technologies, and then power is a big thing driving the industry right now. Where can I get power?
Right.
And we're fortunate in Texas to be living on the largest natural gas oil field in the world.
Yes.
And so we got cheap source of power.
And a proactive, less regulations.
That's going to help a ton, right?
And I think that they also know that we need to maximize the power based upon just the growth of this state in general. Let's take data centers out of the equation, but just population density alone. We have to beef up our energy supply in this state. And I think,
no question. And
I think the folks down in Austin know that. And I think they want to make sure that we're leading that charge.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. I mean, we need more generation.
Yep.
No question.
That's the problem.
And transmission and distribution is a bottleneck too.
Yep. Sure.
We run in that in a lot of places where the existing transmission lines are at capacity.
Right.
There's no room left on on those circuits that are running on those overhead power lines that you see. They're full.
Yep.
A lot of cases.
Yep.
So that means upgrading the poles.
Yep. Bringing
in more wire, building new lines, new right-of-ways.
Yep.
To get it there. So that's a challenge too.
Yeah, I think the 345s are going to be getting beefed up. I've heard, is it 5? They're talking about 500 and some odd. I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah, just to move.
But they're going to be able to have 3 times the amount of power, evidently, coming out of them. And they're even smaller than these, 1950s vintage power lines that we have all across the country right now.
Sometimes data centers get a bad rap for how much power they use, but really what I've read is we're probably around 3% of the consumption in America.
Yeah.
But by 2030, we'll probably be at a 10%.
That's what I've heard too.
Roughly.
Yeah.
So take that in comparison. If you converted every car in America
right
to an electric vehicle, that would consume 75%
wow,
of our
that's a
energy,
stat.
of our electricity, if every car became.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
We just don't have the capacity
No.
for it. So,
well, and if we in the United States don't do it, China's going to beat us to the AI game, because I've heard they're building generation big time right now to try to win that AI game.
yeah, there is a definite race there. But on the power side, the nuclear obviously is
Yep. SMRs.
small modular reactors.
Yep.
New thing that's being worked on.
Still
it could be
ways
an
out,
answer,
though.
but it's a ways out because just safety, regulatory.
Yeah.
You can build them. Who maintains them?
Right.
I got a small modular reactor down the street.
Right.
What are the risks and
Sure.
all that?
But 100% clean.
Yeah. I got to go inside a nuclear reactor.
Did you really?
About a year ago. I was looking at a data center, investing in a data center built right next to the reactor and the cooling.
Yep.
You used to see the big cooling towers that you have near every nuclear plant.
Right.
And a company was building data centers and Bitcoin mining right next to the power plant so that they could get the power. And it was a little cheaper, not much, because it was avoiding some of the transmission and delivery charges and everything.
Right.
But the fact was the source was right there.
Yeah.
And that's strange to think of, because when I first got started in data centers, some customers didn't even want to be next to a railroad track or a highway or certainly not in a floodplain, but anything,
flight
a bad
path,
neighborhood
anything.
or,
now can you give me power?
Can I be right next to the nuclear reactor? I just need the power.
I just need the power.
To me. That's a big challenge. And so we're starting to see more and more data centers pop up in places we would have never imagined.
Yeah.
Like Abilene.
Right.
Yeah. Because
they got access to power.
They got a lot of wind power out there.
That's right.
And plus the Permian Basin.
Yep.
Used to be, that's too far out.
Too far out.
That's
right. From a latency perspective.
From getting equipment and people that can work on it. It's just, you would never thought of that, but now it's happening.
It's happening. I know, it's wild.
So, I think we'll start to see them more and more places.
Yeah.
We talk about the edge.
Yeah.
Pushing out closer to the edge. And sometimes that may mean out in the middle of nowhere where you have a manufacturing plant or something that's out. You need to get your data.
Well, like the machine learning stuff of AI, they don't really care about the latency problem. So those deals can go out to Abilene.
Right. Some are latency sensitive.
Yeah. And
your self-driving car, right? It needs to know right now.
That's right.
I need to turn or this,
That's right. So those deals got to be close to the ear.
I had a company that did geoseismic mapping where they would pull buoys or sonar behind the ships. And they were mapping the ocean floor.
Yeah.
With big, long strands of sonar.
Yeah.
Pinging the ocean floor, right? And they would go up, just crisscrossing an area to create a geological map.
Yeah.
And then every week they would take all that data from the ship and they'd send it to our data center that we had. And then they would run a program and do the compute and to produce the maps. Well, that wasn't latency sensitive.
Right.
And in fact, they were like, well, if power goes out while we're in the middle of the map, we'll just restart it.
Yeah, right.
So you have applications like that.
Sure.
But then other things, if you're trying to make a stock trade and you hit a button because you need to sell right now, you need that needs to happen fast.
Yeah.
Blink of an eye or less.
Well, that's interesting stuff, man. We got a few more minutes here, and I know you got to jump for a call. So we're going to close with what I call the C-suite closers. These are just like little quick hitting questions, just about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all those good things.
Right.
Most impactful book you've read, or something interesting you've read recently?
My favorite's Shelby Foote's Chronicle of the Civil War. It's
really?
a 3-volume. If you ever watch Ken Burns' documentary on the Civil War,
okay,
Shelby Foote was the Southern gentleman, gray-haired professor of history.
Interesting.
That talked about the Civil War.
I'll have to dig into this.
That's probably been I pick it up all the time. I love reading about
that's the old Civil War. Yeah. Something that most people don't know about you, Bryan.
I was voted most handsome at Pierce High School.
Yeah, baby. I love that.
It's hard to believe when my hairline today. But
you wear it well. You've worn it well since I've known you.
Well, just gotta go with it.
I'm barely holding on.
But I had great hair in high school. Let me tell you. Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah.
Blonde, kind of flowing, or what?
Auburn kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Wavy.
Solid. I'll have to get
kind of John Travolta, like back in the early days.
I gotta get a picture of this.
Yeah.
I need to see an old pic.
Back in the 70s. Yeah.
What's the top 3 bands on your Spotify playlist? What do you like to listen to, music wise?
Right now I'm loving that new Post Malone.
Really?
Yeah. All those
good, isn't he?
Duets, with Morgan Wallen and all that.
I mean, stuff.
that album is.
He is a talented young man.
Yeah, probably the Eagles.
Okay.
Go-to favorite.
No, they're at the Sphere. I know. Y'all should get out there.
Gotta go. I wanted to do you too because they've always been one of my top bands.
Right.
And I missed that one. So yeah. I'm thinking I may do the Eagles.
Jack Fraker just went. He did the Eagles a couple weeks ago, and he said it was at the Sphere. It was just incredible.
Yeah, and probably the all-time go-to is George Strait.
Oh man, me too, bro. I can listen to George all day, every day.
Yeah,
61 number ones. I mean, you can't.
And he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, CMA. I think because they're going to honor him.
Good,
but. My wife and I went to see him last year at Ohio Stadium, Buckeye Stadium.
Really?
Yeah. And we were on the 8th row.
How did you decide to just
Stapleton
go to...
in Little Big Town. So it was a great concert, but...
we were debating going to... He played in Salt Lake City, and we were kind of out in that area, and we were kind of debating, do we go out there last minute and see him or not?
Yeah, I just looked all over the country. Where could I find the best seats for reasonable price? And it ended up being in Columbus.
Wow.
And my nephew was graduating from Ohio State.
Oh, well, there you go.
So it's kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone.
If you could have coffee with one historical or famous figure, who would you choose?
Reagan, I think.
Yeah.
He's, that was the first time I ever got to vote, I think it was. And
he saved America back in the day, I mean, it was a bleak time in 1980.
Yeah.
When he came in.
But just, he was just, the great communicator.
God, he was so good.
And
if you haven't watched any of Reagan's old speeches, just go back and watch. I mean, the voice alone is incredible. Yeah, and just
the humor
that he put in there as well, and just bigger than life.
Yeah, just I've measured every president since him to him, and nobody's
no.
I mean,
there's nobody close.
I mean, W is a great guy. I love him to death, and
right, but. Yeah, I mean,
he had a little harder time with his.
Yes. If you could live anywhere else in the world besides lovely Dallas-Fort Worth, where would you live?
30A,
really?
Florida. Yeah,
you love it.
Panhandle, 30A, baby.
So
that's
good.
it. I mean, the best beaches in the world, and
Where do you like going there? Are you a seaside guy? Rosemary? Do you have any?
I go to Dune Allen, which is like
nobody's. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Nobody knows about Dune Allen, but it's kind of at the start of 30A.
Towards the Alabama?
The western end of 30A.
Yeah.
So it's Santa Rosa, Dune Allen, right in there. And then you get into, further east you go, you get into, Rosemary and Seaside and Watercolor and all those.
It's so beautiful.
I like it really chill.
Yeah.
And
Dune Allen's chill.
Yeah, it's very chill. And so that would be my spot.
That's awesome.
I have to deal with hurricanes every year, but.
You got a favorite restaurant in Dallas you want to share with the folks up here or anywhere in DFW?
Texas. I went there last night.
Where is that?
Oh, man. Got to get it.
It's called Texas?
It's called Texas.
Where is this?
Dale Wamstead, he opened Three Forks.
Okay.
Steakhouse on the tollway.
Sure. Legendary.
And then he sold it.
Yeah.
He was partners with Dee Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
And then she went and did her thing.
Yep.
And Dale came to Richardson, Texas and opened Texas. That's the name of the restaurant.
Is it right?
It's right on the Bush and just east of Central.
I think I've seen it. It's on the south side of the road?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. It's right past, the Central Market or whatever, just a little ways down there. Yeah. Or not the Central Market.
More
the Whole Foods. The Whole Foods, right?
Yeah. It's right past City Line, State Farm.
Okay.
And
Texas. I'll have to check it out.
The greatest thing, the food's outstanding, but it's the atmosphere.
The atmosphere?
It's very lively. It's almost like a Old West saloon kind of vibe to it.
I love that.
It's got like a second floor, like it's got an opening right in the middle of the dining hall where you've got the balcony above it. And the people, Dale and his daughter, Shelby, they're great hostess.
Yeah.
And all the staff. And but you got to go, if you go on a Friday or Saturday night and make sure you get there by 7:00.
Okay.
Because they play the national anthem. Really? And they've got an old World War II American flag hanging up on a wall. And they started this after COVID when the restaurants opened back up.
Yep.
And they had just gotten this flag from some ship in World War II. It's got 48 stars on it and bullet holes in it, things like that.
Wow.
They put this flag up there right after COVID and restaurants were opening back up. And it was their first night there. And they've got a guy that plays live music, sax and guitar and sings. And he said, "Do you mind if I play the national anthem? Because it's our first opening night since COVID."
Yeah.
And they did it. And people were just crying and so emotional. And so they've kept it up ever since then.
Every night they sing.
Every Friday and Saturday.
Every Friday and Saturday at 7:00.
Yeah, and it's so moving. Where else in a restaurant in Dallas do you go? They play the national anthem.
That's incredible. Bryan, this was a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Well,
we'll do it again soon.
And anytime.